The courtroom air was thick enough to choke on. The audience had seen arrogance before, but never like this. Karen Blake, a 42-year-old pet store owner from suburban Nevada, stood before Judge Judy Hub with the kind of confidence that comes only from years of getting her own way. Her manicured nails tapped against the courtroom table as if the entire proceeding were an inconvenience. Leashed beside her was a German shepherd, muscular, restless, eyes darting between the lights and the crowd. The dog's tension mirrored hers, edgy, proud, barely contained. Nobody yet knew that within seconds, that leash would fly through the air and television history would be made. Judge Judy's courtroom had witnessed thousands of disputes, from broken leases to family betrayals, but never a moment like this one. The case on paper was minor, a neighbor dispute about a dog attack and emotional damages. The plaintiff, Linda Morales, a 68-year-old retired teacher, claimed that Karen's dog had mauled her smaller terrier and left her with hospital bills and trauma. Karen wasn't just defending herself, she had countersued Linda for defamation and psychological harassment. To the viewers tuning in, it looked like a simple case about a dog fight. But beneath the surface was something far more volatile, a collision between entitlement and accountability. From the moment Karen opened her mouth, every warning bell in Judge Judy's mind went off. "Your Honor, let's get one thing straight," Karen began, her voice carrying that deadly mix of sugar and venom. "I'm not some reckless dog owner. I train German shepherds for discipline and protection. If Mrs. Morales and her rat dog had any sense, they would have kept their distance." The audience gasped. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing to razor points. She had met hundreds of Karens in her career, but few this brazen. Linda's hands trembled as she held up a vet report, explaining how her terrier had needed 12 stitches. "All I wanted was an apology," she said softly. She laughed at me. That small sentence shifted the energy in the room. The audience leaned forward, even the bailiff's eyes tightened. Judge Judy noticed how Karen's expression barely changed. No remorse, no shock, only irritation that she had to listen to this. When Judy asked her to respond, Karen snapped, "Maybe if she could control her toy dog, mine wouldn't need to remind it who's alpha." The room went dead silent. Even the dog let out a low rumble as if punctuating the insult. Judge Judy took a measured breath. Her voice was flat, cold. "Miss Blake, that is not how civilized people speak in my courtroom. Control yourself and control your animal." Karen smirked as if she had won a round. That smirk would become her undoing. She rolled her eyes so hard that the camera zoomed in instinctively, catching the exact moment viewers would later replay millions of times. "Judge, I run a business that helps people train animals. I think I know a little more than you about dog psychology." She tugged on the leash for emphasis. The shepherd barked once, sharp and warning. The bailiff instinctively stepped closer. Judy's gaze did not flicker. What the audience didn't know was that Judge Judy had already done her homework. Her team had pulled animal control records showing 3 prior complaints against Karen's dog for aggressive behavior. 2 neighbors had filed police reports after verbal threats. The judge knew exactly what kind of person she was dealing with, someone who confused dominance with strength and fear with respect. So she let Karen dig her own grave. Each answer, each sarcastic remark, became a shovel stroke deeper into the pit she was building for herself. "Tell me," Judy said, leaning forward slightly, "if you train for discipline, why does your dog seem more nervous than trained?" The tone was bait and Karen took it. "My dog's fine," she snapped. "He just doesn't like loud, judgmental women screaming at him." The gasps from the audience rolled like thunder. Even Karen's dog flinched as if sensing the incoming storm. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses, folded them, and placed them on the bench, a gesture that longtime viewers knew meant one thing: the execution was imminent. But instead of exploding, she spoke quietly, each word a measured cut. "You are one sentence away from learning the difference between confidence and contempt. Choose your next words carefully." It should have been a warning. It was an invitation to disaster. Karen laughed, a short, sharp sound that sliced through the tension like broken glass. "Honestly, Judge, I don't have time for this drama." She turned to her dog, snapped her fingers and said, "Show them you're not scared, boy." Then, to everyone's horror, she lifted the leash and flung it forward in Judge Judy's direction. The shepherd lunged, a blur of motion and muscle. Gasps erupted. The bailiff moved instantly, grabbing the dog midair as papers flew and the audience rose to its feet. For a split second, time stopped. Judge Judy didn't move a muscle. Her expression was not fear, it was something far more dangerous: disbelief tempered by fury. "Get that animal under control now," the bailiff boomed, restraining the dog and pulling it to the side. Karen was still talking, still trying to justify herself. It was a gesture. I was just making a point. Her voice echoed desperately through the room. But the energy had shifted completely. The audience was no longer amused or annoyed, they were outraged. Gasps turned to murmurs. Someone in the back whispered, "She threw her dog at Judge Judy." The sentence sounded so absurd that it didn't seem real. Judge Judy rose slowly from her chair. When she spoke, her voice was low, controlled, and utterly terrifying. "Miss Blake, you just committed assault in my courtroom, with a living creature as your weapon." Karen's smirk finally collapsed into shock. The bailiff moved closer, hand hovering near his belt. Judy continued, "I will decide your fate in 30 seconds. Until then you will remain exactly where you are." The dog whimpered, its ears flattened, as if it too understood that something irreversible had just happened. Outside the courtroom, viewers would later call this, the moment entitlement met its master. Inside, the air was so charged with tension that nobody even blinked. The audience knew they were about to witness the kind of justice that only Judge Judy could deliver, the kind that doesn't just punish the crime but destroys the arrogance that fueled it. If you believe nobody, no matter how loud, rich, or entitled, should ever try to intimidate the law, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more moments when justice roars louder than arrogance. Because what Judge Judy did next didn't just restore order, it restored faith in justice itself. The courtroom was still humming with disbelief. The moment Karen Blake hurled that leash forward had already gone viral inside the studio audience's whispers. But Judge Judy wasn't just angry, she was calculating. She had seen arrogance before, but what Karen had done was something darker. It wasn't just defiance. It was the belief that she was untouchable, even in front of the law. "Sit down," Judge Judy commanded, her tone so sharp it sliced through the chatter like glass. Karen froze, still breathing hard, still muttering something about media setups and overreactions. The bailiff stepped forward and retrieved the German shepherd, now trembling near the bench. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The dog looked frightened, while the human who claimed to be its master still radiated fury. For a few seconds, Judy said nothing. The silence itself became a verdict. Cameras zoomed in on her face, the calm before detonation. When she finally spoke, her voice had the stillness of a warning siren before a storm. "You just tried to use that animal as a threat. You didn't lose control, Miss Blake. You surrendered it." Karen tried to laugh it off. "Oh please, I didn't throw him. I was just proving he's harmless." The words came out brittle like glass about to shatter. Judy didn't blink. "You proved something all right. You proved you're not fit to own a dog, or speak to another human being with basic respect." Karen's face turned red. "You can't talk to me like that. You don't even know who I am." A low murmur rippled through the audience. That single line, "You don't even know who I am," was the hallmark of every viral courtroom downfall. Judge Judy tilted her head. "You're correct. I don't know who you are. But after today the world will." The bailiff crossed his arms, watching her closely. Karen shifted uncomfortably. The leash, now confiscated, sat coiled on the bench beside the dog. The tension was unbearable. Judy gestured to the clerk. "Play the pre-recorded statements from the witnesses." A short video clip rolled on the courtroom monitor. Linda Morales, filmed in pretrial deposition, described the attack. "Her dog charged across the yard. My terrier never had a chance. I screamed, but she just stood there and said, 'That's what happens when you don't respect boundaries.'" The audience collectively exhaled in disbelief. Karen's smirk faltered. "She's exaggerating. That woman's always been jealous of me," she protested. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Jealous of what, Miss Blake?" Karen blinked. "Of my success. My store, my clients, my reputation." "Your reputation?" Judy interrupted. "Would that be the same reputation that comes with 3 citations from animal control for reckless handling, and a pending restraining order from your neighbor, Mrs. Walters?" Karen's jaw dropped. "That has nothing to do with this case." "Oh, it has everything to do with it," Judy said, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Patterns of behavior matter. When you treat animals and people as tools for your own ego, the pattern always shows." The dog whimpered softly, its ears folded down. The sound somehow made the room even quieter. Judy's tone softened, not for Karen but for the creature beside her. "That dog isn't your weapon. He's a victim of your temper." Then, turning back to the defendant, "And I suspect this isn't the first time you've used him to intimidate someone." Karen crossed her arms tightly. "You can't prove that." "Watch me," Judy said. The clerk read from a statement. On 3 separate occasions Ms. Blake was warned by law enforcement after her dog was used to threaten delivery workers. No charges filed, but written warnings documented. Karen's expression flickered between panic and denial. They're lying. Those people were on my property. Judy's eyes glinted. Miss Blake, I've met hundreds of liars. You know how I recognize them? They keep talking after the truth is already obvious. The audience erupted in brief applause before Judy's glare silenced them again. The judge leaned forward, her tone surgical. Let me explain what's about to happen. You think this is entertainment? You think this is a debate? It's not. This is an evaluation of your character under pressure, and so far, it's failing spectacularly. Karen scoffed, looking around as if appealing to the cameras. You can't humiliate me like this on TV. I don't have to humiliate you, Judy replied. You're doing an exceptional job all by yourself. It was the kind of exchange that made this show legendary, every word dripping with precision, every insult doubling as a lesson. Judy didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. She dismantled her opponents slowly, piece by piece, until arrogance had nowhere left to hide. She looked at the bailiff. Please remove the animal from this room. It's not his fault his owner behaves like a rabid one. Karen gasped. You can't take my dog. I just did, Judy said simply. The bailiff gently led the German shepherd out. The dog didn't resist. It followed willingly, tail low, glancing back once as if saying goodbye. That image burned into the audience's minds. A symbol of how control and cruelty always collapse under truth. When the door shut, Judy turned back to Karen. Now, Miss Blake. With your distraction removed, we can get to the truth. Karen's voice trembled, but her ego refused to break. You'll regret this. Judy smirked faintly. I rarely regret justice. The clock ticked. Cameras focused. Viewers around the world would later call this the minute of reckoning. It was the moment Judge Judy shifted from procedural to personal, where law turned into poetry. Here's what's going to happen next, Judy said. You're going to answer for your actions, one question at a time. And if I hear one more ounce of attitude, I'll remind you this courtroom isn't a playground. It's where pride comes to die. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. The audience sat frozen. Judy leaned back slightly, her eyes never leaving the trembling woman in front of her. We're not done. Not even close. If you've ever seen arrogance collapse under truth, hit that subscribe button. Because what Judge Judy exposes next doesn't just end a case, it ends a lifetime of entitlement. The bailiff had barely finished leading the German shepherd out of the courtroom when Karen Blake's mask began to crack. The arrogance that once filled her posture drained away, replaced by something uglier, panic. She wasn't scared of Judge Judy yet, she was scared of being powerless. And for someone who'd spent her life intimidating others, that feeling was poison. She stood behind the defendant's table, her eyes darting toward the cameras, looking for a way out. The audience sensed it, the unraveling had begun. They leaned forward as if watching a car inch toward a cliff. Judge Judy sat perfectly still, chin resting on her hand, observing Karen with the kind of precision that turns silence into a weapon. Miss Blake, Judy began, her tone deceptively soft, why did you bring that dog here today? Karen blinked. Because he's part of this case. No, Judy said calmly, you brought him because you thought he'd make you look powerful. That's ridiculous, Karen shot back. He's my emotional support animal. Judy's eyebrows rose. Emotional support? You just used him as a projectile. The audience burst into quiet laughter, short, shocked, uncomfortable. Karen flushed red. It was an accident, she shouted. Judy raised a hand. Enough. You seem to think the rules here bend for you. They don't. This isn't your pet shop, Miss Blake. This is a court of law. And here, arrogance has a price. The camera zoomed in on Karen's face, jaw trembling, eyes wide, ego crumbling. She tried to talk, but Judy spoke right over her. You filed this lawsuit claiming you were emotionally damaged because your dog was called aggressive. But based on what I've just witnessed, the aggression didn't come from the dog, it came from you. For the first time, Karen had no comeback. The truth hit harder than any insult could. Judy flipped through the case file slowly, like a predator drawing out the suspense. You claimed your neighbor's dog started the fight. Yet every witness, everyone, says otherwise. Even animal control marked your shepherd as high risk. Tell me, Miss Blake, why should I believe you? Karen clenched her fists. Because people hate confident women, she snapped. If a man had a protective dog, nobody would complain. But when I do it, suddenly I'm dangerous. Judy didn't raise her voice, but the tone shifted, cutting, surgical. This isn't about confidence. It's about cruelty disguised as confidence. You don't protect, you provoke. Karen's mouth opened but no sound came out. Let me tell you something, Judy continued, leaning forward. I've met real strong women, mothers, veterans, teachers, women who fight for others, not against them. You weaponize strength. You think power means control. It doesn't. Power is restraint. The audience broke into soft applause. Even the bailiff, stone-faced as ever, looked satisfied. Karen turned away, whispering under her breath, "This is a setup. This is all fake." Judy caught it. "You think this is fake? You think the law bends to your tantrums? Try me." The silence that followed was unbearable. You could almost hear the hum of the cameras. Judy's eyes locked on hers. "In all my years I've seen liars, manipulators, thieves, but you're something else. You're someone who truly believes she's above consequence. And that belief, Miss Blake, is what's about to put you in chains." Karen took a step back, shaking her head. "You can't talk to me like that." "I can," Judy said evenly, "and I will. Because you crossed a line that doesn't get uncrossed." Judy gestured toward the clerk. "Bring in the footage from the hallway incident." Karen froze. "What footage?" The monitor flickered on. Grainy security video filled the courtroom. Karen, earlier that morning, tugging harshly at her dog's leash while shouting at a producer. Her voice echoed, "If you people don't get me on first, I'll make a scene you'll never forget." The audience gasped. Karen's own words became her undoing. Judy let the silence linger before saying softly, "You were right about one thing. None of us will forget this." Karen tried to spin it. "I was joking. You're twisting everything I say." "No," Judy said, "you're finally hearing yourself the way the rest of the world does." The sound of Karen's breathing filled the microphone, uneven, desperate. "You can't just." Judy cut her off. "I can do whatever justice requires." For the first time Karen's body sagged. The performance ended. What stood in front of the nation now wasn't a proud trainer, or a confident businesswoman. It was a frightened woman who had built her entire identity around domination, and now had none left. The audience could see it, the quiver in her jaw, the shaking hands, the fading bravado. Judge Judy leaned back, her voice measured and final. "Let me tell you what's next. Your countersuit? Dismissed. Your credibility? Gone. But your accountability? That's just beginning." Karen whispered something too quiet to hear. "Speak up," Judy commanded. Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "Then maybe," Judy said, "it's time you learn that meaning nothing doesn't undo doing everything." The words hit like a verdict. If you think accountability still matters, and if you believe silence after arrogance is the sweetest justice of all, drop a comment saying "Justice served." Because the next 30 seconds of this story will remind the entire world why Judge Judy's courtroom isn't just entertainment, it's a mirror. The moment Judge Judy uttered those last words, you could feel a shift in the air. It wasn't just a courtroom anymore, it was a reckoning. Karen Blake stood stiff as a statue, breathing hard, her eyes flicking toward the exit as if she could somehow escape what was coming. But Judge Judy's gaze locked her in place like a spotlight trapping guilt itself. "Miss Blake," Judy said, her voice low and steady, "you've mistaken mercy for weakness. That ends today." The audience went silent. You could hear the hum of the lights, the soft whir of a camera lens adjusting. Karen tried to recover some dignity. "You can't talk to me like I'm a criminal. I'm not one." Judy tilted her head. "You're right. You're worse. A criminal at least knows when they've crossed a line. You call it confidence." Karen started shaking her head violently, her voice climbing. "I just lost my temper. Everyone does." Judy's tone stayed flat. "People lose tempers. You lost control of your soul." The room was completely still. Even the bailiff, who'd seen everything, kept one hand near his belt, just in case. Judy turned toward the clerk's desk. "Read the statute for contempt and assault with a live animal." The clerk began to read, voice formal and heavy. Each word made Karen's face pale a little more. She'd come to court expecting applause, not arrest. When the clerk finished, Judy looked directly at her. "Do you understand what you've done here?" Karen stammered. I was angry. It wasn't serious. Nobody got hurt." "Nobody got hurt?" Judy repeated. "Look at your dog, Miss Blake. You turned a loyal animal into a prop for your pride. Look at Mrs. Morales. You turned her home into a place of fear. And this courtroom? You turned it into your stage." She paused, letting the weight of the words land. "Do you know what happens to performers when the show ends? Karen's voice was a whisper. What? They faced the reviews. And right now your audience has already written theirs. A murmur ran through the gallery. The audience wasn't angry anymore, they were waiting. They wanted to see justice in motion. Judy took one slow step down from her bench, standing now at the same level as Karen. The cameras zoomed in close, capturing the face of a woman who had spent decades teaching the world that the law could still bite. Miss Blake, Judy said, her eyes never leaving hers, in my courtroom arrogance ends one way. She nodded toward the bailiff. Cuff her. The sound of the handcuffs clicking echoed like a gavel strike. Gasps then applause filled the room. Karen's mouth dropped open in disbelief. You can't do this. This is a TV show. Judy's reply was instant. No, Miss Blake. This is real law. The cameras just make sure the world learns from it. The bailiff pulled her hands gently but firmly behind her back. Karen struggled once, then stopped when Judy spoke again. You thought you'd walk out of here with sympathy. Instead, you're walking out with a lesson. Karen tried one last defense. You're humiliating me. Judy shook her head. Humiliation is what happens when ego meets truth. I'm not doing this to shame you, I'm doing this to protect everyone else who thought cruelty was strength. The audience burst into applause again, unable to hold it back. 4 years they had watched Judge Judy handle liars, cheats, and manipulators. But this moment felt different. It wasn't entertainment. It was cleansing. As Karen stood cuffed, Judy turned to address the courtroom, not just the people inside but everyone watching from their living rooms. Let this be a reminder. The minute you believe your power makes you untouchable, you've already lost it. Justice isn't about noise, it's about balance. It always finds its way back. Karen's breathing grew heavy. Tears began to streak the mascara she'd applied so carefully that morning. Judy didn't soften. You will be remanded for evaluation and animal control review. Your neighbor's medical bills will be paid in full. And as for your business, well, I suspect the public will decide what happens next. The cameras caught every detail, the trembling lip, the reddened eyes, the silent nod that meant defeat. For a moment, Judy almost looked tired. Not angry tired. You know, Miss Blake, I've seen this too many times. People mistaking cruelty for courage. But courage isn't what happens when you shout the loudest, it's what happens when you choose to be decent when nobody's watching. Karen didn't answer. She couldn't. Judy turned back toward her bench, voice quieter now. Take her out. As the bailiff led Karen past the gallery, she whispered something no microphone caught. But the cameras didn't need the words, the look said everything. The same woman who once bragged she could control any animal was now being guided like one. When the door closed behind her, the audience sat frozen in awe. For a long time nobody spoke. Then Judge Judy turned toward Mrs. Morales, who sat trembling in quiet relief. Justice isn't about revenge, Judy said softly. It's about safety. You can go home knowing both are served. Mrs. Morales nodded through tears. The entire gallery stood and applauded, not for drama but for decency. Judge Judy gave one final look toward the camera, her eyes fierce but calm. To anyone watching, she said, remember, authority isn't loud. It's earned. If you believe respect for law still matters, tap that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. When the courtroom doors slammed behind Karen Blake, it was as if the entire room finally exhaled. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway echoed through the silence she had created. For a moment, Judge Judy simply sat there, motionless, her eyes fixed on the empty space where Karen had stood only minutes before. The audience wasn't cheering anymore. They were still contemplative. What they had just witnessed wasn't just a ruling, it was a revelation. Judy looked down at her bench and then toward the clerk. Please make sure that dog is placed in temporary care until animal control determines the proper adoption process. Her voice softened, the edge gone, replaced by something close to compassion. He's not the villain in this story. The clerk nodded. Yes, Your Honor. That single line, he's not the villain in this story, would later trend on social media, turning into a viral soundbite used in thousands of motivational edits and reaction videos. People didn't just replay the outburst, they replayed the moment after when Judy shifted from fury to grace. Because that was what her courtroom always stood for, justice with a human spine. Mrs. Morales, the plaintiff, sat quietly, her small hands clasped together. She hadn't expected this ending. She had come for fairness, maybe an apology, but what she got was something deeper, validation. Judge Judy turned toward her. Mrs. Morales, you've shown remarkable restraint. Most people would have walked away angry or sought revenge. But you stood up, not just for your dog but for everyone too scared to speak up against arrogance. That matters. Mrs. Morales's voice trembled. I didn't want her punished, Your Honor. I just wanted her to stop. Judy gave a small, tired smile. That's what justice is supposed to do. It stops what shouldn't continue. Outside the courtroom, the world was already catching fire. The clip had hit the internet before the verdict had even been signed. Within an hour, hashtags like #JudgeJudyJustice and #KarenInChains were trending across social platforms. News outlets replayed the video on loop. The dogs leap, the bailiffs intercept, Judy's icy command, cuff her. It became the most replayed moment in courtroom television history. Memes, commentary videos, and reactions poured in from around the world. But beneath the humor and shock was something rawer, a sense of moral relief. People weren't cheering because a woman had been humiliated, they were cheering because for once, arrogance didn't win. By the next morning, Karen's pet store had lost nearly all its clients. Former customers came forward with stories of mistreated dogs, falsified training claims, and unpaid refunds. Local news outlets interviewed neighbors who described years of verbal abuse and intimidation.